All right, we're live. You can hear us okay. Guillermo Salazar here with Adrian from Multifamily Hangout, Multifamily the three podcasts.
Multifamily Hangout and also Multifamily X Consulting. Yes,
Multifamily
good to be
X.
here.
Excellent, great to meet you. Today we're connecting to talk about centralization R&M and the multifamily side of things. Adrian, let you introduce yourself and just share with everybody your background experience and why you're
Everyone,
passionate about it.
Adrian Danila. I've been in multifamily facilities for 20 plus years. I started as a groundskeeper, worked my way up to several director positions in multifamily, and ended up as a vice president of facilities for a company overseeing 32,000 apartment homes. And for about a year now, I work as an advisor for the multifamily industry, for property management companies, also for properties that are building technology to help property management companies solve problems, mainly maintenance, but outside of maintenance too.
And how we met is we got connected through the conference here at Blueprint 2024 in Vegas. I've been listening to your podcast, and one of the great things that Adrian does is really digs deep in to hearing and listening all the different things that people are being faced with respect to centralizing on the R&M side of things. And what's great about the podcast series is that there's they all follow a specific theme, and in this you're getting a whole lot of different opinions and ideas in terms of how people are trying to solve the centralization issue from an R&M specifically. Now, in your opinion, what is the single biggest blocker for centralization in R&M?
I'm going to start by
Sure.
saying the challenges that I'm seeing, that I'm noticing from outside looking in, because this has been a theme for a couple of years right now, and everybody's trying different forms of centralization. I think everybody's defining it differently based on their needs, the size of the portfolio, and also their footprint as well. So I think the biggest challenge out there is that the fact that multifamily is already a scale business. What people don't understand is that you don't go door to door fixing things like in a neighborhood or various neighborhoods. Our assets are located in a single place, right? So you have 100 units or 200 or sometimes 1,000 apartment homes. They're located in the same place, right? So that's a business that's already scaled, right? We know how many man hours are involved in that process, how many maintenance technicians you should have, or at least we assume we know, right? But for the most part, let's just assume that we know. So when you're talking about centralization, you're talking about taking various number of those communities and try to run them from a centralized point together, right? And that involves, first of all, travel time. So I think travel time is like the biggest challenge. First of all, time that our teams are spending traveling is going to be time that are not spending working, right? The first thing then, is going to be the transportation. Are they using their own transportation? Are we going to buy now vehicles to help them transport? Are we paying guys mileage or gas expenses? There are also states that have very strict rules about how that could be done, or what can and what can't you do. So I think that's kind of the main challenge, right? The main turn away from trying the centralization thing. Is it possible? Of course, yes. Smaller portfolios and portfolios that are really close together. If you have, let's say, apartment communities within 1 or 2 or 5 miles within each other, then you could definitely look into centralization, because it's reduced travel time, and you could arrange schedules in such a way that your maintenance team doesn't actually travel throughout the day, with a few exceptions, right? You could actually have a technician being assigned at one property for an entire day without having to travel. They travel to work anyway.
So you kind of lump all the service requests or maintenance requests into a single block of work. They go there and they knock off the unit 102, unit 604, unit 809, all in a single trip.
Typically, that's how it goes.
Now on your side, now if you're the resident, if you're unit 104 and you've had to wait until there was a batch that's ready, you're suffering downtime for whatever your maintenance request was for. Now, how does that affect ratings? How does that affect the resident experience?
It definitely affects, and in all reality, let's just speak about resident experience, right? Everybody wants to provide great experience, but I think there are in the operators' minds now bigger fish to fry, and I'm gonna explain.
Yeah.
In an era right now where interest rates are through the roof, some owners have purchased their properties with variable interest rates. They're in a position where they can't refinance, they can't sell, they can't do anything. and their cost increased like 2 and 3 times their cost of operating a property. And it's a bad position to be in. I think for them, the main focus is on surviving and actually not losing the properties, not going foreclosed on a property versus the resident service quality. Yeah, they will keep saying that we want to provide, and I believe that they want to provide, keep providing those services. But the reality is that you have to pick your battles, and it's kind of hard to do both in a current environment for a lot of the management groups out there.
So how you just described it, that ownership scenario feels like a 1Z, 2Z, maybe 10Z experience. What about those that are in like 5,000, 10,000 units? Like those would have a different debt kind of risk than they would have a single duration for their debt. They would have different layers of debt and not suffer the exposure of a single variable mortgage. They would have, all different kinds of portfolios of debt. So if it's not interest rates, right? So if you have a 10,000 unit portfolio from an owner perspective, what's driving you to centralize?
Reducing cost.
And why is
Increasing
cost so
efficiency.
important?
It's always important. Reducing cost means, there's two ways of making money. There's two ways of making profit. Multifamily. One is to increase your income. The other one is to decrease expenses. Historically, when you talk with any asset manager, whether they tell you or not, maintenance is going to be seen as an expense. What happens with expenses, we all know. They get trimmed down, eliminated whenever possible. So that's always been a focus. How do we spend less money without actually cutting down too much on the quality of the service? So cutting cost. Nowadays, it's like more important than ever, right? Because, rent increases, they're not like 3 or 4 years ago. The market is just not that way, right? It's stagnated. There's a lot of overbuilt in certain areas, and I'm thinking Austin and Atlanta would be perfect markets. There's a shadow market of single family homes, like companies, they're buying individual homes and they turn them into rentals, so they're competing with multifamily as well. And it's a significant percentage of the rental market units in markets like Atlanta, for example. So those are factors that can be overlooked. Owners had to do what they had to do.
So the question is, so we can agree that's a priority, right? So it's reducing costs, increasing revenue, basic business. What do you, in your mind, what prompts a multifamily, we'll start with that, to initiate centralization today, this quarter? What makes it say, centralizing M&R is a higher priority right now than the resident experience, or a higher priority than the a new credit authentication app or something like that? Like, how does centralization get to the top of the priority for an owner operator or an operator organization?
That's a tough question, because from my experience working for large institutional operators, companies are siloed. So it's not necessarily a decision at the very top of the organization to where the CEO or COO says, these are our 3 top priorities, right? They're making a priorities. Each group within the property management group has priorities. I rarely saw priorities being prioritized at a company level to say, this is our top. There are initiatives, but they're initiatives for various groups within the company, not for the company as a whole. Is that right or wrong? I'm not here to discuss that. I just think that's just the way it is. That has been my experience for about 20 years.
Because it is interesting, because the whole concept of centralizing implies that it's a corporate function all of a sudden, right? Versus a distributed function. And I think that's a lot of what we're hearing from customers or prospects is that's a lot of the tension that emerges, is that you're taking something that has historically been a necessity to be decentralized, and now we're starting to decentralize it, and that's creating a lot of friction.
It is creating a lot of friction, because there's so many things that had to change. Also for the personnel, they change from the technician that used to be, let's say, in charge with just one property. Right now, they had to be assigned to 2 or 3 or 5 properties. It becomes the issue of taking ownership. Or before they would do the work on one property, and they did a good job. They don't have to come back or come back after hours. Often right now, when they're responsible for 5 properties or 3 properties, let's say, maybe somebody else didn't do their job, and then this particular technician has to come back after hours to address something that should have been addressed during the hours by somebody else, and that creates a lot of animosity and a lot of friction. So that's a real concern from all the operators that I've been talking to. This is the biggest pushback that probably they get from their maintenance teams.
Was that they don't want to go to the trip. They don't want to do second trips, especially after hours.
They don't want to. They just hate on call. That's a given.
And that's a fair, right?
And especially think about when it's something that they didn't have a way to control, but somebody else should have controlled.
Right.
That's what creates this animosity, this friction.
What are companies? What are kind of the top 3 ways that they try and centralize? What are the choices they have before them to centralize?
It's kind of tough to say. I think everybody's like still experimenting. I've seen smaller operators that have smaller size assets, right? They have 20 living units here, 30 here, and they're all within a geographical area. In my opinion, they should have centralized 10 years ago. Sure. If they had this portfolio, like this should not be a conversation for today, because that's the only way you would actually, you can assign like one person full-time to like 50 apartment homes. It just doesn't happen. Typically, the ratio, whether it's good or not good, we could have a different conversation. Ratio is 1 technician per 100 units. When we have 20 here or 12 here and 25 there, you're not gonna have enough work for one person to keep them busy. Therefore, they gotta work fractional, or you're gonna have like one person assigned to multiple sites. So that should have been the case long time ago. If it hasn't been, it's a great thing that they're doing it now.
So is that a full-time hire, or is that a third party in that story?
It depends. I've seen both. I've seen both sides. I've seen full-time hire, and I've seen them being also outsourced. I think it varies.
Preferred vendor network or pod or something like that.
Yeah.
What we heard yesterday around centralization was all around the lack of talent, lack of available labor. Now, like all real estate, there's localization around that. Like if you're in Austin, you can't find people, but if you're in Kentucky, maybe you can. And we talked about cost originally. Where do you think that the lack of labor, how does that affect the core business of operating multifamily that would force you to centralize?
In a big way. First of all, I think it'll force you to outsource, and secondly, to run things more efficiently. And then I think centralization could come after that. But that's the word that I've seen things. I see a lot of outsourcing being done, more outsourcing being done than what we're used to. I think we just have to increase our tolerance to outsourcing stuff. The model exists already. Commercial.
Business process outsourcing is happening forever, right?
Commercial maintenance runs that way. They keep employees, full-time employees, that do basic functions of the job, and everything else they do outsource to a preferred vendor. So the model exists. It's just about multifamily, like kind of getting on that train and getting used to the fact and accept the fact that due to a series of factors, it's almost impossible to keep a business running from a maintenance standpoint long-term, fully staffed. One of them is, this is a theory of mine that, hasn't been tested, I will say, but I think at a worldwide level, businesses are growing at a faster pace than the population increases. Therefore, within our lifetime, we will always see staff shortages. Second part is multifamily maintenance. It's fighting over not just competing industries like construction or single family, other industries that are related over talent, but it's fighting over talent with the entire world. I'm gonna explain. Gig economy is real. I travel a lot. I've seen a lot of Uber drivers that would never go back to a full-time job. That's a real situation. Some of them used to work in multifamily maintenance. You got to think about that. And then there's also companies that hire people to work online from home. This could be a company from Hong Kong that right now is recruiting in Kansas City, and they're taking employees that otherwise probably they would be interested in working maintenance. So those are real issues. They're not going away. I think also people like their freedom more. So you will see the gig economy model like being more accepted within multifamily as a real solution, as a real alternative to the regular full-time employee workforce. I think it's going to be a slow process, but it's going to happen eventually.
I had a really good conversation with a multifamily, like the 20,000 units in the Maryland area, and their biggest competition for talent is government, right? So you think of the average age of a trade is around 45, 46, male, and they've been operating without any sort of pension or health care, or a light touch, right, for most of their life. But now they've got an opportunity to go work for the government or go work for education, like go higher ed. All of a sudden, you're a maintenance super at Georgetown University. You're probably getting a bit of a pay bump, but now you've got incredible healthcare. You might have healthcare for life, right? And now you've got a pension that's going to come through the union of that organization. So this property manager is talking to me and they're saying, like, how can I compete when a 45-year-old, primary bread earner is looking for security for their life? How am I supposed to how am I supposed to hire somebody where we're expecting them to turn over, half of my staff to turn over every other year, and they're talking about lifetime pension commitments. And they're like, there's no amount of dollars we can pay on an annual basis that competes with a pension that's going to be there for life. And so they're really struggling to find people in an area that isn't saturated with multifamily, but it's just the lack of talent. And so they're looking at centralization strictly because they've got buildings that have open job openings that are 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and it's affecting revenue, it's affecting turns, it's affecting their ability to. Just think about it. Like, if I'm trying to compete with Georgetown University for a maintenance tech, any specialization, even a handy person, and I'm losing that battle, and I've got buildings that are open, and all of a sudden I've got residents that are turning over because they turn at a 50% rate these days, and I can't turn my units over because I've got no people. How am I going to solve this problem? Because the one person's running around changing batteries and thermostats. It's like this compounding series of events or at least what we're hearing, that's driven by the lack of talent, increasing salary and wages, and the fact that the whole population is changing their priorities.
Like I said, I don't think the centralization is the first thing to look at. You got to look at running things more efficiently.
Yeah.
Right. So cutting down that time, travel time, whatever that is, extra trips to the maintenance shop from the maintenance shop. So, trying to resolve the issue in like one trip versus doing multiple trips. Technology. We just had I've been building a facilities leadership council with maintenance leaders from all over the country. And we just had a meeting an hour ago. And the theme of our conversation today was automation. And there were goods and bads and uglies out there being talked about. But the main thing is, if you're going to have, your maintenance teams going back and forth to and from the office, exchanging keys, like physical keys versus, having them do it on a phone, just like, when you go travel,
Airbnb.
When you go travel to a hotel and you have the app on your phone and they give you access on your phone. A lot of times, their hotels, you don't even have to check in. You check in on your phone, go straight to your room, and when you check out on your phone. So basically, it's such a frictionless experience that you never have to see in your entire stay a hotel employee. I think that there's things that we should be considering. One point was made there that somebody is checking that lock to make sure that it's in working condition before you're moving in. I think, that could be a point to be made, but I think it's more to it than that. There's a lot of stuff like as far as what type of grade locks we have on the doors. right? Because if you're buying something from Amazon and you think it's gonna do the same thing as a commercial grade lock on a Hilton door is going to do, chances are it's not, right? There's a reason why you buy it like 5 times cheaper on Amazon than what the cost is for a hotel lock. So it's going to require a lot of investments, but at the same time, the payoffs are there eventually. And once you make those investments, you know that you don't have to like have the same recurring expense every year or every other year. They should be long-term investments. So
And we'll close this out real quick here for everyone listening. So top of mind, all the people you've talked to and your customers as well. Can you think of one obvious success story for centralization on the R&M side, and what did they do differently?
I think the success story that I've seen is, again, smaller companies that own smaller size assets within a vicinity. Okay, so that doesn't actually tell me that that's a replicable model to larger institutional multifamily that have thousands of units or tens of thousands or 10,000 units or tens of thousands of units within a city. You still have to break it down and see like really what makes sense. You have to look at how do I run things more efficiently before saying if we're running it centralized from a central location that and assume that automatically that's going to be ran better because there's things that don't necessarily transfer from the classic model to the centralized model. I will say, please look at running things like efficiency first. Once you think that you eliminated all the inefficiencies, if you want to go on like super scale, right? That's how I call it, super scale,
Yeah.
or super centralized, go for it. But
This don't hang a picture with a sledgehammer.
yeah, but basically, if your goal is like to centralize and just hope for the best, probably it's going to be a lot of pain involved there and
So
a lot of
yeah,
failure.
so don't centralize for centralization's sake.
I wouldn't.
There's a lot
I
of
would not.
low-hanging fruit in just your
100%.
core operations.
100%.
Got it.
Properties, lots of properties are poorly run, or sometimes for very objective reasons, like you said, it's a lack of workforce. So when you only when you're budgeted, you should have like 3 maintenance employees on a property, and you only run it with one person. Like, whose fault is it? We could like try to point fingers. The reality is that you don't have enough workforce, right? And you have to solve the problem somehow. Outsourcing, it's definitely something that we will be forced to do more of, outsourcing. And then, like I said, centralization should be like the ultimate, like the last stage
Got it.
of the process. But definitely it's possible. I like to see companies like doing it, automation, centralization, outsourcing, outsourcing, and then efficiencies. And then if they're still thinking that there's a value in centralization, go for it. But I want you to see that in a current scheme, in a current business environment, business plan, like you're running that very efficiently, and then you could go for it. Like,
Right. Because before you hand it off, you have to make sure it's running. It's documented. It's not
if it's not running now, okay. So let me just make a final point. If it's not running now in a model that's like local model, let's call it, what makes you believe that a centralized model will work better? And I'll give you the best possible example: government, right? Whenever the top government, the federal government, is trying to take more from the local governments, it's typically not a good outcome, and it's for a reason, right? Things should stay as local as possible. Sometimes it makes sense to centralize. It makes sense, but make sure first that at the local level things go well, right? Before you go for the that's kind of the last phase of you improving your efficiencies.
Excellent. Those are great points. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate your time, and follow your podcasts on.
Follow our podcast. So we have 3 podcasts. The Multifamily Hangout is one that we go live with my friend and co-host Chris Moreno every Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. The Multifamily Hangout. The second one is Multifamily Chronicles. We produce 4 to 5 episodes a month. We're on YouTube and all major podcast platforms. And the third one is Multifamily X Masters of Maintenance, which is maintenance specific podcast. which you will find also on most major podcast platforms.
Yeah,
and
I really like that one. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Thanks for your time.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest
Take
of your week. Bye, everyone.